Hello! So today I'm going to do one of those reaction type videos to the Booker 2023 shortlist reveal. It's typical that a year in which I was most disappointed in the long list is the year that I picked the most predictions for the shortlist. I say predictions, I didn't really predict anything, I just said what my top 6 favourite books were, and it turns out that 5 of those made the shortlist. Which is officially the best I've ever done with my favourites making the shortlist, so yeah, kinda chuffed. Turns out I just picked the wrong book concerned with absent mothers. The judges went with Western Lane, whereas I personally thought that Pearl was better in every single way. Damn you, Western Lane, I was so close. Now, I'm not going to do a rundown of the shortlist, like a synopsis or blurb of each one or my thoughts on each one. I've done individual videos for every single book on the long list, and in the description box of this video, I will leave links to the ones that made the shortlist. So if you want an in-depth idea of my thoughts and feelings on the shortlist, then yeah, please click on one of those. So I've been having a little bit of a think about the shortlist. Mainly I've been asking myself this question: do these 6 books represent, or does even one of these 6 books represent the best in literature, in fiction, over the past year? And I'm afraid to say that no, I don't think any of them do. As already mentioned in my last video, not even my 6 favourite books from this long list would make my favourite books of the year. So that's kind of telling on how I'm just a little bit nah on it overall. But with all that being said, I have actively decided to be a part of this and post videos about it, so you've just got to get on board, haven't you? It is what it is. So now I suppose it comes time for me to predict what do I think out of the shortlist is going to win. And I don't think I can predict what another group of human beings are going to decide is the best book out of these 6 books. However, if I was going to put money on it, then I would say it's against Prophet Song and The Bee Sting. I think one of these 2 books, one of these 2 Irish writers, is probably going to win it. It would make me really happy if Study for Obedience was to surprise everybody and win it. That's also mainly because 2 reasons. One, I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was excellent, but also because of how Marmitey it is and how many people really hated it, it would just bring me joy for the reaction of that one winning it. So I was a bit undecided for what else to do with this kind of reaction video, what might make it a bit interesting or a bit different, other than me gloating at the fact that I managed to get 5 out of the 6 correct. I know, I did very well. So I've decided to do something a little bit different. I am going to do a Booker 2022 shortlist versus Booker 2023 shortlist. A little kind of tournament. So what I've done is I have randomly put together one book from the 2022 shortlist to go up against one book from the 2023 shortlist. There'll be a round 1, and then the winners of round 1 will go on to round 2, then we'll have a semi-final, then a final. So the key to any tournament is how it randomly gets put together in round 1. Based on what books are put against each other in round 1, if you do it randomly, would definitely change the winner each time. But I don't know, I just wanted to do something a bit fun. I've used one of those random online generator thingies to give me my round 1 matchups, and we're just going to go from there. Feel free to play along at home. So, round 1. We have, first up, The Bee Sting versus Glory. Now this is a really easy one for me because I absolutely detested Glory. I thought it was utterly awful. I couldn't understand. It wasn't doing an Animal Farm thing in which the characters, the animals, act like animals. These animals in Glory were acting like animals but also acting like humans, so it didn't feel like it really connected. It was a mess. It was muddled. I didn't enjoy the writing style. I just hated it. And now The Bee Sting, as much as I've said many times, I really did not like the ending, and I thought the last quarter was a little muddled, and I'm not too sure why the decisions were made. There is so much about The Bee Sting that is sticking with me. There is so much about The Bee Sting that I really enjoyed. I found it very funny. I thought the plot was really good, and I was just so connected to each of the characters. So this is an easy one for me. The Bee Sting is the winner. Next up we have Western Lane versus Small Things Like These. I'm really happy that these 2 got randomly put together because they are both very short books and quite simple in their prose. However, Small Things Like These just seem to have a magic about it in its tone, the feeling it created, and the tension that was building within it. I don't think I've read a book in quite some time that was able to so easily win me over and get me wrapped up in it in such a short amount of pages. I just adored Small Things Like These. It can so easily be reread and just bust it out in the winter or at Christmas time, and it gets you there in its feeling and its tone, and there is that tension there, and it just flows so well. Western Lane, if you've been watching my videos, It was too pared back in what it was trying to do, especially in the themes it was dealing with, and what I wanted it to teach me about grief within a British Indian family and how that relates to squash. Just none of it worked for me at all. So yeah, this is an absolute no-brainer. Small Things Like These is the winner. Next up after that, we have Prophet Song versus Treacle Walker. This is another really easy one. So, Treacle Walker and Glory were the two books from last year's long list that I couldn't believe they made the shortlist. I really enjoyed last year's long list. I thought there was loads of really good books on it. And the two that I absolutely detested, which was Glory and Treacle Walker, both made it into the shortlist. So I was a bit like, I couldn't believe it. I didn't like Treacle Walker. I didn't like the way it was written. Couldn't connect to the characters. Didn't really enjoy the flow of the prose. Didn't really enjoy what it was trying to say. I found it very confusing. And I like confusing books. I like books that make you work. But this just made me feel like I was like, what is the point of this? This is awful. So I hated Treacle Walker. And of course, Prophet Song is one of my favourite reads from the long list. The tension, the way it builds and what it is doing is, yeah, it is so easy, this one. Definitely Prophet Song's the winner. Next up, we have This Other Eden versus The Trees. This is hard because I thought both of these books were excellent. I love This Other Eden for the interesting characters, even though I found it hard to connect to character in This Other Eden, which is the one thing pulling it down from being like a 5-star book. I love the way it was written, the sort of lyrical but yet really blunt, to the point prose, the way it was quite fragmented, its decisions to build that story. It's not massive in page count, but it really gave me this sort of overview. I like the distance that This Other Eden puts the reader at, in which it is forcing you to kind of make up your own mind and your own decision on how things are playing out. I don't feel like Paul Harding is really forcing you in any moment to lean one way or the other. It's just giving it to you, and I just really like that. However, The Trees by Percival Everett is just, I love that book. And the more time passes, the more it goes up in my expectations. The Trees was so funny. It was just so funny, and it was so blunt and in your face. It was almost punching you in the face with its satire and what it was trying to say, the politic of the book, whilst also being utterly hilarious and having incredible, absolutely fantastic dialogue all the way through, whilst also having a supernatural element as well. It was just a tick box dream for me. I really, really loved The Trees, and I'm afraid to say that in this matchup, yeah, The Trees is going to be the winner. Next up, we have If I Survive You versus The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. Now, If I Survive You, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was excellent. However, I do still stand by the fact I think it would make a better book if it was one cohesive narrative. I really loved the first story that was told in second perspective, but the strongest this book was for me was in the last two stories that really connected together. I got a real build of tension, I got a real connection to character in that moment, and the stakes genuinely felt a little bit higher. I enjoyed all the stories in this one, but The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, it really taught me something. I knew nothing about the history of what it was exploring. I knew nothing about the culture. I was really sort of in the dark with it, and it was a hard read. It wasn't an easy read. It's got a magical realism element to it. I just loved what The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida was doing, and once you get to that like kind of halfway point with Seven Moons and you've really got used to the language of it, I just went with it. I really, really enjoyed it. And it forced me to go away and Google and research. And any book that has grabbed me and got me and is forcing me to go away and do a little bit more research is definitely a winner. So yeah, I'm going to go with this matchup that, yeah, The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida is the winner. Next up, we have Study for Obedience versus O. William. I know a lot of people didn't like O. William last year. They thought it was a bit too simple in its prose. They thought it was a bit too commercial in its output to make the book a shortlist. However, I really enjoyed it. I loved what it was exploring. I got so fully into the mindset, into the head of the protagonist and her experiences of grief, her experiences of separation, her experiences of being a mother. And I really enjoyed the plot and where it went and that kind of looking back and memory and just everything. I really enjoyed O. William. I think I was one of the very few, but I was really rooting for it. I just thought it did something really, really well and really, really simply. But Study for Obedience, it's a lot more hard work. It's a lot more surreal. There's a lot more tension. It's a lot more creepy. I still look at Study for Obedience as a horror novel. I really do. It's it puts you in this very kind of weird state of mind. And when you get into the flow of the writing of Study for Obedience, yeah, it makes the hairs on your arms stick up. I was just quite like creeped out by it, and I thought it was really intense and disturbing and depressing, but it really had me. And that way of looking at women as other and women forcing themselves to be subservient, and that feeling that creates, the book created within me, I thought that was excellent. I just thought it was excellent. So yeah, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Study for Obedience definitely beats O. William. So now we're into round 2. So next up we have The Bee Sting versus Small Things Like These, and I'm going to speed up as I go along now because I've already talked a little bit about each book. For me, this is going to be Small Things Like These. It's been a year, it is still stuck with me. It was incredibly short, so easy to reread. I'm going to reread it again this Christmas. It just, yeah, it had this sort of magic to it that I don't know. I just got lost in it. I read it so quickly. Yeah, and The Bee Sting, I don't know. It's big. It's 650 pages, and I hated the ending, and I thought the last section of it was a little disjointed. I'm never going to reread The Bee Sting again. I'm probably still going to remember lots from it. I still think it deserves its place on the shortlist. But it's not going to beat Small Things Like These for me. And I think that's really telling of how good Claire Keegan is when in a book so short, I can't even remember what the page count is for Small Things Like These, but for a book so short, that easily for me trumps something that's 650 pages long. Yeah, well done. It's that Small Things Like These is definitely my winner. Next up we have Prophet Song versus The Trees. This is pretty tough matchup, but it's going to be The Trees. The Trees is just too layered. The Trees is just doing too much. It's funny, it's horrifying, it's surreal, it's got a kind of magical realism element, a fantastical element to it. It's got a real politic that it is pushing, and it is smacking you in the face. It is looking at the atrocities and the history of racism and lynchings. It is doing so much, whereas Prophet Song is doing something that's been done so many times before, but it's just doing it to an excellent standard. For me, without a doubt, The Trees beats Prophet Song. Next up we have Seven Moons of Mali Almeida versus Study for Obedience. This is a tough one because I kept going back and forth because I really, really, really enjoyed Study for Obedience. I loved being wrapped up in its world. However, I think I'm going to have to go Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. I think I just learnt more. I got more from Seven Moons of Mali Almeida than what Study for Obedience is doing. Study for Obedience is tonally excellent and really creeped me out. But I don't know, will it stay with me? Like, what will I be thinking about when I think about that book? A few things in there. But I think when I look back on the Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, the experience of reading it, the having to go and research and going through that process and slowly getting into the groove of the writing style and just getting swept away in it. Yeah, it just sits above Study for Obedience for me. So yeah, in this little matchup, Seven Moons is the winner. So now we have a three-way semi-final in which we have Seven Moons versus Small Things Like These versus The Trees. So I have a semi-final made up completely of last year's Booker shortlist. For me, this was quite an easy one. Compared to The Trees and Small Things Like These, Seven Moons of Mali Almeida just doesn't match up for me. I thought it was an excellent book, but it's not quite on the level. It doesn't quite create the feeling and the tone, and it hasn't stayed with me as much as The Trees and Small Things Like These has. So yeah, going into the final is definitely The Trees versus Small Things Like These. So we're saying goodbye, but well done third place to Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. So here we go, the final. Small Things Like These versus The Trees. And I'm going to tell you now, this is very tough, but I've just gone with my gut, and my winner is The Trees. The Trees is just much more my kind of book. Just so many ticks across the board. I thought it was funny, it's surreal, it's got a wonderful satire, it's got a politic that's punching you in the face, it's got really unique, interesting characters. The dialogue is absolutely on point all the way through. When I look at it, I can also imagine it being an incredible movie that someone like Jordan Peele might make. I just thought it was excellent to fantastic. And for me, yeah, it trumps Small Things Like These. So my winner in this weird little thing I've decided to do is definitely The Trees. So there you have it, The Trees is the winner for me. How did you do at home? What would your winner end up being from the kind of matchups that I had? Of course, as I already said, you put any of those books against different books, you might end up with a different winner, but that's kind of where I've ended up. I have no idea exactly what that little tournament has achieved, but I just wanted to try something a little bit different. So to finish this video off, I do have two questions from the little bracket or little tournament that I have just done. What would your winner end up being? And the second question would be, out of the 6 books on the shortlist, what one do you think would win and what one would you like to win? please let me know in the comments below. And as always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you are all well.